So I hear that they're making another Matrix movie, and that Keanu Reeves is coming back for it. Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking he's back. You like the shitty Keanu Reeves impression?
No one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself.
Yeah, now if you didn't guess it, today we have The Matrix. So yeah, with the new Matrix, I guess, got into an argument about this at lunch the other day. So Matrix, I guess, sequel, the new Matrix sequel, the fourth film in the franchise. You still say sequel. I always associate sequel with 2, but I digress. There's a new Matrix movie coming out, so of course we got to capitalize on that and do what Hollywood and cinema has to do till the day's end, and what they've done a lot this year, bring the original back to theaters. By the way, I didn't anticipate this, but there's going to be a lot of like ASMR, just leather. Hopefully it's not too loud or distracting. Regal being Regal, and I appreciate them for this, they brought back The Matrix into theaters, not just into theaters, but also into a 4D showing. So, similar to what they did with Gremlins, I get to re-experience this, or rather experience this for the first time in a theater, but also in like a 4D, moving seats, air, and like water type of setting, which was really cool, honestly. It was nice I got to experience it that way before the new one comes out. For context, The Matrix, the Matrix, the original film, came out in 1999, and I know that I own it, and I've seen it like 2 or 3 times, but I haven't seen it since it was some years have gone by since my last showing of it. So this was almost like, I remembered half of it, and the other half at the same time, I almost felt like a new film to me, so that was pretty neat. But The Matrix is always heralded as one of those, like, sci-fi greatest films, unimpeachable, such a landmark of cinema, and you can't touch it. We'll get to that in a second. Directors, for the second time ever on my channel, we are looking at a film that has 2 directors, and we, of course, have the Wachowskis. And say what you want about them. They have such a checkered filmography, and I'll get to in a second as well. But for the sake of this film, I don't know if this was their first film they directed together, or if this was their first film they ever did, but it's the Wachowskis. What you might know them from, every now and then they'll split off to do their own thing, which is kind of funny because the new Matrix film coming out only has one of them returning as director instead of both of them, so I don't recall if the story said it was a falling out or if one person was interested and the other one wasn't, but there you have it. In terms of what these 2 directors have done together in the past, from what I can glean, they have both also co-directed some, again, they really like sci-fi, but they often have missteps of sci-fi. Cloud Atlas, which was received with mixed reviews. I never got a chance to watch it because it was like a whole part 1, part 2, super long films affair. I just haven't had a moment to sit down and watch them. And then you have the definitely not well received Jupiter Ascending, which they also co-directed. They like these ambitious, crazy sci-fi films, which Matrix is no exception, technically. And also, under the filmography, they didn't direct it, but they helped work on V for Vendetta, which is a phenomenal film in its own right, and which kind of goes to show that, they have some solid concepts and can help work towards a better end goal, but in terms of what they come together to come and direct together on, it seems to be kind of hit or miss, because you have the first Matrix movie, and then you have, of course, 2 and 3, which weren't as well received for their own reasons, and same directors and all that, so it's how do you approach that? I might review those as well in their own given time, but we'll get back to that in a bit. Stars a young Keanu Reeves, and it's, especially with the renaissance that has been Keanu kind of I don't want to say resurrected, but in the last several, the last 5+ years, without question, he has made, in terms of his career, a resurgence for sure. I mean, John Wick definitely helped with that, but I mean, he's just been in more and more. He's so well loved, so highly regarded. You rarely ever hear or see anybody, news outlets, fans, people, actors, and nobody really has a crossword to say about him. So he's just like, he just is looked at as like a really great, wholesome guy at this point. But yeah, it stars him, and technically stars him and Lawrence Fishburne, kind of young Lawrence Fishburne, but both have gone on to do their own like creative endeavors and still are together. As you see in John Wick, they are still acting and working together. Of course, there's other actors of note in this film. I always like worth mentioning that Hugo Weaving has a very like, first it's kind of subdued, and then he just has some like really good, just intense scenes as Agent Smith. But yeah, I mean, Hugo Weaving's in it, of course, Carrie-Anne Moss. I mean, I go on down the list of all the actors that like are in this and are iconic for their own reasons and do a great job of bringing the world of the Matrix to life. But I'll get into their performances in a minute. To start from the pros, seeing it again through not a fresh pair of eyes, but seeing it through my currently aged eyes in today's world, which has been, 22 years later after the film came out, seeing it in theaters, like in, 1080, HD, whatever. I don't know about 4K, but it's definitely high definition. Even experiencing it in 4K, seeing it by today's standards, I'd say it is still, debatedly, but I would say it's still groundbreaking film for what it was in terms of it's just iconic. It's like it was able to inspire and influence so much pop culture. It's just one of those films that just left such an impact on the scene of cinema that it's been like imitated and copied, and variations of it have been done up even to this day. Not to mention the film itself was like life-changing for Keanu. I mean, he already had like some films under his belt. Like, he was already well known for like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. He was well known for Speed, and now we have The Matrix. It's showing kind of showing that he's just an actor of all trades. Like, he can be in anything from action, adventure, thriller, to like sci-fi, to comedy. It really kind of showcased Keanu as like the Hollywood star that he ended up becoming. And even for me, in a perspective where I always kind of poo-poo on like CGI and digital effects, this film, for its year and for what it did, it had a very good balance of practical effects and CGI. Because I mean, of course, when you go into the digital world of the Matrix, it's going to be digital, but whenever they could be practical with their effects, they were. And you could tell, like, for a film that was made back in this year, and I'm not sure what the budget was on this film, but like, they made a lot of it work with what they had, it seemed, and they did it really well. It still translates and holds up very well, I'd say, as a good, like, compelling action sci-fi movie. Like, it still holds up really well. It's supremely creative and very entertaining. Like, it is very creative with these concepts of the Matrix and making you, like, rethink your world and reality. It still has that late 90s, what eventually ends up being that late 90s, early 2000s kind of like, it still feels a little, it's cheesy by today's standards, but back then it was like edgy, when it was like, all leather and trench coats and these like, kind of like slightly misshapen sunglasses, and going in there and getting Uzis and blowing the place up and hacking, being like, we're in. By today's standards, it's a little bit hokey, but by then, that was what was cool. That was what was in, hip, that was the shit. And honestly, it kind of still holds up today. I know I keep saying that, but it does. But if I'm being fair, it's not a perfect film. Somebody brought this up to me a long time ago, and I can't help but see it, and I'm glad they brought it up to me. I love Keanu Reeves, and I think that he's a great man and a great actor, but his delivery is almost always the same in what he does, and this film is no exception. It's that kind of like, he can work with the range and with the emotion, but it's always like, I'm paraphrasing now, but the way that his delivery is. And honestly, a lot of actors in this film, him and Carrie-Anne Moss especially, like, you can tell they have some good solid emotional scenes, but like, some actors' delivery throughout the film is kind of, I don't know about flat, but just like, I don't know if it's tonal or an inflection, or if I'm just like going crazy after analyzing so many films, but like, the delivery in some scenes is just a bit off. It kind of feels a little weird, like they're not even sure, like they're just kind of like reading the script and not actually like acting it out, And it's not the whole film, and it's not enough to like have me looking at it like, oh, what a piece of shit this film is, but like it's noticeable now for me, and I can't help but like think that, well, that kind of affected me, my viewing experience, because it takes me out just a tiny bit, and I'm like, why are you talking and not acting right now? And then like, I'm not gonna get into like, I mean, sure, if you look hard enough, there's plot holes in any film. I think they do a pretty good job of explaining and world building a lot, like explaining why things work the way they do, why they are the way they are. There's very little in terms of like, I don't have much to complain about in that regard. Like most of my questions that I was thinking about on this newest viewing are answered or taken care of. That's all well and good, and I believe, and I'll get to them later this month, but I believe that the subsequent films continue to world build even more from that point. So that's all well and good. What I still don't like, the one thing that is a detraction from this film, well, I guess the second thing really, is that, you know, the bit where like Trinity's like, well, I was told that the man I fell in love with would be the man who saved the world, so that's why you can't be dead, because I love you. I've just never been a fan of like love as a plot device, I guess. And I mean that in the sense where it's like, technically, I guess you could say it wasn't her love that brought him back, because like when he gets shot up, but like at the same time, he's still coming to realize he is the one, and he's already seen the code and the Matrix and all this. So I mean, that's like, it could be just coincidence, but I also it doesn't sit right with me where it's like that's the answer. It's like love is the plot device that makes sure that our hero doesn't die by the end. Like, I don't know. I guess maybe I'm just nitpicking too much now. Maybe I'm just a little bit too hoity-toity about it, but that's just kind of where it hit personally for me. At the end of the day, I don't have much negative to say about The Matrix. I still really enjoy the film. I guess you could say, do I love it? I mean, I really enjoy it. I don't know if I love The Matrix, but I think I can recognize it for what it is, which is one of the most influential sci-fi films of our time that has gone to permeate pop culture and spawn sequel upon sequel, and even now I want to say remake, but like even another sequel with today's modern tech and all that. Like, it's still going. It's still well known. You meet very few people out there, I mean, people my age, I guess, that haven't seen it, but you meet very few people out there that haven't seen it, and that I think goes far enough to say how special and how much of an accomplishment it was overall. Personal view on it, which this isn't like negative or anything, but I say my personal review is that I give Matrix a very high 4 out of 5. Like, it's near perfection, I think, and that's looking at it as a film from 1999 that technically has its fair share of plot holes and definitely is not a perfect film, but it works really well for what it is. It holds up really well for what it is, and just because of what it has done, the quality that's inherent therein, and also my personal enjoyment, I feel secure enough giving it a high 4 out of 5. At this point in life, if you haven't seen The Matrix, I highly recommend doing so. If you get a chance to see it in theaters, definitely go see it in theaters. I'm going to try to review the other 2 films and put them on my channel before I go and see the latest one. I don't know if I'll have enough time to do it, but like, I just kind of like, I like reviewing the original film and then going to see the next one, like I will be doing with the next review, West Side Story. I went and saw the original West Side Story, and now I'm gonna go, and then I saw the remake, and I'm gonna review that too. And same thing with like, you know, Resident Evil, or in this case, you know, The Matrix. I've seen The Matrix. I want to rewatch the other 2 movies and then watch The Matrix Resurrections, and then, you know, have the whole thing fresh in my mind. So stay tuned for that. As always, thank you guys and gals so much for watching, and yeah, see you in the next movie review, and goodbye, traveler.